My name is Dan Dorval, and I'm President and CEO of Dorval and Cherney Financial Advisors. I am an independent certified financial planner and author of my book, Financial Success for the Rest of Us, Reality-Based Financial Planning for Mainstream America.
Hi, my name is Leah Woodley. I'm an associate financial advisor with Dorval and Cherney Financial Advisors. Our conversations discuss what it means to do quality of life planning in all areas of your life. Dan, I sent you an article that was in Market Watch about a 51-year-old woman who was essentially wined and dined and then put into a $500,000 annuity. And you and I have had conversations about these dinners before and this being used as a sales tactic to get people into products that they may or may not need. How about you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I did look at the article, and one of the big red flags right off the top was she took her entire retirement and put it into one annuity. And that is almost never a good thing. So we've seen this type of situation pop up in our own practice. I tell this story all the time that we help a lot of nurses, and a lot of these nurses, when they retire, you start getting into that 60 to 65-year-old range, you get invitations to these dinners all the time. So your mailbox will just get flooded. And a lot of times, especially if you're doing the whole, going down south for the winter type of thing, you really get bombarded in Arizona, Texas, Florida. And what it is you get agents sponsoring these dinners. They're a nice restaurant, and they say, come check this out. And they pitch an almost too good to be true type of investment product. And the basic premise is you can't lose money. And that's the first and most important thing. So they really jack this marketing up when the market is going down. So people see some negatives and they start to say, well, you can't lose money. So that's the first thing. And then they start to talk about, well, then you can get the gains of the market as well. Well, so I can't lose money and I'm getting the gains of the market. I mean, that sounds pretty amazing. So we had a couple, and I'm going to go through this story because it really matches that Market Watch story pretty closely. He had retired from Exxon, and he had a whole bunch of Exxon stock from his long career there. And during the Great Recession, the market was going down, Exxon stock was going down. They started to get very scared about the losses that they were experiencing. And now the first thing is they probably shouldn't have had that much Exxon stock, but that's another story. So they have fear, and fear is one of the worst things you can have going to one of these dinners. So they go to this dinner. The person ends up selling them on an indexed annuity contract for their entire retirement, very similar to the Market Watch article. And they felt like, there were enough kind of red flags. They wanted to get an outside opinion. So they called me. They said, I know you help a lot of nurses. Would you be willing to sit down and talk to us? And I'm like, sure. So I looked through this annuity and it was complex. I mean, even for someone like me, I'm looking through this stuff and it was very difficult to determine how like all the moving parts fit together. So I started to describe some of the pros, which they had been told, but I also described some of the cons. And a lot of the cons are very high surrender charges, very limited flexibility in how they could access their money. And this went for the rest of their retirement and potentially even affected their heirs if they died with the contract. This particular contract was so restrictive, it even would have affected how their kids would take the contract out. So I walked through why it probably didn't make sense to put all of their retirement in something like this, because that's what the agent did. And they walked away and they ended up canceling the contract. It was still during their free look. So most annuities, have a free look period of, 15, 20 days, whatever it is, and they canceled the contract. And I thought, okay, that's probably a good thing. She calls me about 4 or 5 days later, and she goes, Dan, I think we might have made another mistake. And I'm like, okay, hold on, what happened? The agent flew up from Arizona. So this dinner had originally been when they were down snowbirding in Arizona. They had come back to Minnesota. This agent flew up from Arizona, took them out to dinner, very much like the Market Watch article. So wined and dined them, and then had them sign something saying, oh, I don't actually want to cancel. And she goes, can we sit down and talk about this again? Because we may have made a mistake. And I'm thinking, okay. So I asked them to describe how this all went down. And they're like, he told us about all the pros again, but none of the cons. And it just felt like such a good deal. And so we walked through it again, and they canceled again. And then the agent did not come back. And you might be wondering, so a few things as our, viewers might be watching this going, well, okay, first off, how dumb were these people? Well, that's not the issue. The salesmen for these contracts are unbelievably good at what they do. These are the best salespeople in the world, and they are selling just these guarantees that say you can't lose money. And if somebody's experiencing fear, that is a profoundly strong motivator for them to say, I can't lose money. The agent in this particular case would have received a 9% commission on about $500,000, which is the example in MarketWatch as well. And that is a $45,000 upfront commission for selling this particular product. Would you fly up from Arizona, take them out to dinner, get them some drinks, and do something like that? I think most people would for $45,000.
Yeah.
So the issue here is these agents are highly conflicted. And as you and I talk through this idea of annuities, we have to understand those conflicts so that the viewers who are watching this realize that the annuities themselves are, in most cases, are not inherently bad. They are just tools to help you accomplish a goal. The problem is that the people selling them have such a conflict that in many cases, these are very inappropriately sold products. And that's the problem.
Yes. Wow, I cannot believe that that couple had to experience that. And as you said, yes, fear is a heavy motivator. Anytime someone's fear or desperate, decisions can be made that are not the best. You mentioned an indexed annuity contract. Can you tell our viewers what that is and maybe discuss some of the other types of annuities that are out there?
So first off, when you hear the word annuity, just annuity in general, and there are a lot of different kinds of annuities. Okay, so an annuity in general is just an insurance contract that is designed for investing in some way, shape, or form. That's all an annuity is. When you hear the word annuity, I want you to think expensive. Now, it is not good or bad, right or wrong, but there are costs in the insurance aspect of the contract that make it expensive. Now, a lot of times those expenses are hidden inside of the contract, so it's hard to know exactly what they are, but they are there, and that's the insurance cost. Now, in indexed annuity, what that means is it's tied to some form of the stock market. That could be the S&P 500, that could be other types of indices, and these things are getting more and more creative all the time. So there's a whole bunch of indices they might be tied to. So the premise is I get to participate in some form of the gains, but when the market goes down, I never lose any money.
Mhm.
Now, the issue with that is, again, that's a very attractive proposition for most people, but the issue is the surrender charges are often very high. They often last for a very long time. It could be 7 to 10 years in many cases. The caps and limits on these contracts are incredibly complicated. So you might have a cap for 1 year. You might have a monthly cap. In this particular example that I was citing, what happened is you could make like 2% per month on the index, but that was highly restricted in how you earned that particular cap. Well, the illustration didn't show any of the potential negatives. So they could earn some pretty high returns. And in reality, when I evaluated, like kind of back tested it,
Mhm.
in reality, those returns just were never going to happen. It would have been very rare for the situations to line up perfectly. So an index annuity, probably one of the most complicated contracts that exists, and they rely on that complexity in order to sell people on something that may or may not be in their best interest. Now, other annuities, there are plain vanilla fixed annuities. Those kind of look and feel like a CD. It's just that they tend to be longer term. So a bank CD might be, 6 months to a couple years, where a fixed annuity might be 3 to 5 years, or maybe even longer. And that is just, I'm paying you a fixed rate of return. So maybe I get a 5% 3-year fixed annuity right now. Okay, you want a fixed rate, set period of time. Those can be very effective tools for that scenario. Now, be aware that for most people, this is for people who are older than like 59 and a half, because there are restrictions in how you can access this. So like you'll see examples, and I've seen this many times, of 30, 35-year-olds being sold annuities. That is almost never a good thing. Like that is very, very rare that that's a good thing. So fixed annuities, we do use those for certain situations, defined time frame, defined interest rate, very simple to evaluate. Then you also have variable annuities, and these would kind of look and feel in most cases like mutual funds. You could pick different types of investments, and the goal there is to have tax deferral. So that's usually for non-IRAs, non-Roth IRAs, and yet we see them sold inappropriately there as well. And the key in most annuities is, if you're using it correctly, you are probably getting some form of a guarantee that you can't get on other types of investments. And that guarantee might be an income guarantee, like I want a certain amount of income for the rest of my life. Might look and feel like a personal pension in that scenario. That can be an appropriate use of annuities. You could have a death benefit guarantee, like, hey, I'm just going to invest this money, and when I die, there's going to be a guaranteed amount to my heirs. That can be an appropriate use. But overall, most of the times, these annuities are sold rather than bought, and they are sold based on certain features. And if those features apply to you, great. If those features don't apply, it's probably an inappropriate thing.
Yes. Actually, in the Market Watch article, the woman was sold the annuity when she was 35. That right there was a red flag.
Big red flag.
Big red flag. So you talked about surrender charges. Typically, what do those look like? What is
So
the
it kind of
impact?
depends on the type of annuity, but in many cases, you end up with a declining surrender charge. So if it's a 7-year surrender charge, you might see a schedule that looks like, maybe 7%, and then like 6, 5, 4, 3, or, something like that, where it's a declining surrender charge. And the reason they put these surrender charges on the contract is because in most cases they are paying an upfront commission to the agent. And you have no idea what that commission is. It's very rare for that to be like truly disclosed. And so the insurance companies are not in the business of losing money. So what happens is, if I pay the agent, let's say a 6 or 7 or 8% upfront commission, I'm not going to lose that money if you pull it out within, a year, 2 years, 3 years, when you realize that maybe this wasn't an appropriate sale. And so they put these stiff surrender charges on there to recoup the money that they essentially paid out to the agent. And that puts some pretty big restrictions on people. And a lot of times they go, well, I don't intend to use the money during the next 5, 6, 7 years. I'm okay with the surrender charges. Well, the issue with that, and we saw this yesterday, is this person had an annuity with a pretty significant surrender charge, and her situation had changed.
Mhm.
Life happens. Life can be messy. And she had gone through a divorce. Her situation had changed. It may have been an appropriate thing to do when she did it a few years ago. But now all of a sudden, I had to tell her, if you want to take more than like a modest amount of your contract out every year, if you want to take that money out, you're going to be subject to thousands of dollars in surrender charges. And she didn't really truly realize the extent of how she was tied in. So again, that's a reason why you don't want to put all of your money into an annuity, because you lose a lot of flexibility. If you were to do some into an annuity and then some into something that maybe complements, maybe there's more flexibility, that can oftentimes be a decent approach.
Yes. I'm glad you mentioned that. A lot of people don't realize that you are locked in for a certain period of time.